The great hall of the Galactic Council stretched out like a vast crystal dome under the twin suns of Nexus Prime. Inside this magnificent structure, representatives from dozens of alien species gathered to discuss the most pressing matters of their shared galaxy. The air hummed with translation devices as countless languages merged into understanding. Captain John Martinez stood at the edge of the observer section, his human eyes taking in the incredible sight before him. 6 months had passed since his ship Aurora had made first contact with the Villani research station near the Outer Rim territories. Now he watched as the greatest minds in the galaxy debated and argued about threats and opportunities that spanned star systems. The Zephyrians dominated the center of the hall with their tall, crystalline bodies that caught and reflected light in mesmerizing patterns. Their leader, Thais, communicated through telepathic waves that the translation systems converted into audible speech for the other species. These beings had mastered quantum physics when most other races were still discovering fire. To their left sat the representatives of the Karathi Empire, a proud warrior race that had built the fastest ships in known space. Their sleek vessels could cross the galaxy in mere weeks using advanced jump drive technology that humanity could barely comprehend. Admiral Kess wore the traditional armor of his people, each piece crafted from metals found only in the cores of dying stars. The peaceful Villani occupied the diplomatic quarter of the assembly. These gentle beings had prevented more wars than any other species through their patient mediation and deep understanding of alien psychology. Their ambassador spoke in soft tones that somehow carried across the entire hall without amplification. Ambassador. Lisa Coleman sat quietly in the designated human section, a small area marked clearly as the observer zone. She had been instructed by Earth's government to watch, listen, and learn. Humanity had only recently achieved faster than light travel, and their crude chemical rockets were considered primitive by galactic standards. The main topic of discussion today was the growing threat from the Outer Rim territories. Reports had been coming in for months about entire star systems going dark. Merchant vessels that ventured too far into those regions simply vanished without sending distress signals. The few survivors who escaped described massive ships unlike anything seen before. Council leader Thys projected his thoughts to the assembly. These devourers appear to be some form of machine intelligence. Our deep space probes have detected vessels of enormous size moving through the affected systems. Each ship appears to be harvesting all available matter from planets, asteroids, and even small moons. Admiral Kess stood and activated a holographic display showing grainy images captured by long-range sensors. The Karathi Navy has prepared a response fleet. Our graviton weapons and phase shield technology should prove more than adequate to deal with these primitive machines. We estimate the threat will be neutralized within standard months. Ambassador Coleman raised her hand to speak, but was politely ignored by the session moderator. The Villani diplomat noticed her gesture and whispered something to the moderator, who then acknowledged the human representative. Earth would like to offer our military assistance in dealing with this threat, Coleman said in clear, measured tones. Our fleet may be small, but we have extensive experience in combat situations. A wave of what could only be described as polite laughter rippled through the assembly. Several species exchanged glances that clearly communicated their amusement at the human offer. The translation systems worked overtime to convert various expressions of condescending humor. Thys responded with barely concealed irritation. The human species has achieved spaceflight only recently. Your weapons technology consists primarily of chemical explosives and metal projectiles. The Devourers have already proven resistant to basic energy weapons. We appreciate the offer, but this situation requires advanced military capabilities. Coleman nodded respectfully and returned to her seat. She activated a small recording device and began documenting the various military strategies being proposed by the different species. Each plan involved sophisticated weapons systems and complex tactical maneuvers designed to minimize casualties while maximizing effectiveness. The Zephyrians suggested using their psionic abilities to disrupt the machine intelligence controlling the Devourer ships. The Karathi wanted to engage them with overwhelming firepower using their most advanced dreadnoughts. The Villani proposed attempting diplomatic contact to understand the machine's motivations. As the session continued, Coleman noticed a pattern in all the proposed solutions. Every species approached the problem from their particular strength. The telepaths wanted to use mental attacks. The warriors wanted direct confrontation. The diplomats wanted negotiation. None of them seemed willing to consider alternatives outside their areas of expertise. When the session ended, Coleman gathered her notes and prepared to return to Earth. She had been observing these proceedings for months now, and a clear picture was emerging. The galactic community operated under strict protocols and established procedures. They had rules for everything, including how to conduct warfare. As she walked through the corridors of the council station toward her transport, Coleman reflected on the instructions she had received from President Karen White before leaving Earth. Watch how they think and how they fight. Learn their weaknesses as well as their strengths. Most importantly, let them underestimate us for as long as possible. The human diplomat smiled slightly as she boarded her ship. The galaxy's greatest civilizations were about to face their first real test in centuries, and they had no idea what was coming. More importantly, they had no idea what humanity was capable of when pushed to the edge. 3 months after the council session, the first major engagement between galactic forces and the Devourers took place in the Kepler sector. Admiral Rick Johnson watched the battle unfold from Earth's deep space monitoring station hidden in the asteroid belt between Mars and Jupiter. The facility had been constructed in secret over the past year, designed to observe galactic military actions without being detected. The Karathi Navy had assembled their finest battle group for the engagement. 12 heavy cruisers and their flagship dreadnought approached the Devourer vessels with confidence that their superior technology would quickly resolve the threat. Their ships gleamed with polished metal hulls and energy fields that bent light around their elegant forms. Beginning tactical analysis, reported Dr. Helen Brooks from her position at the sensor array. As Earth's leading expert on alien technology, she had been studying the various galactic military doctrines for months. Her team monitored communications, weapon signatures, and tactical patterns from every major engagement reported by the Council species. The Karathi opened fire at maximum range with their graviton torpedoes, weapons that could theoretically crush any known material by manipulating local gravity fields. The torpedoes struck the lead Devourer ship, a massive vessel roughly the size of a small moon. For a moment, the human observers thought the attack had succeeded as the enemy hull buckled and twisted under the gravitational assault. Then something unexpected happened. The damaged sections of the Devourer ship began to flow like liquid metal, reshaping themselves into new configurations. Within minutes, the vessel had not only repaired itself, but had somehow adapted its hull composition to resist further graviton attacks. Impossible, Johnson muttered as he watched the tactical display. No known material can restructure itself that quickly. The Karathi pressed their attack, switching to phase disruptors that could theoretically disrupt matter at the molecular level. Again, the weapons proved effective for the first few strikes. The Devourer ships took significant damage, and several smaller vessels were completely destroyed. But the surviving ships began to adapt again, their hulls shifting to new molecular structures that rendered the phase disruptors useless. Dr. Brooks began frantically recording data as the battle continued. "They're not just machines," she announced to the monitoring team. "They're learning in real time. Each weapon that hits them teaches them how to defend against that specific attack type." The engagement lasted 6 hours and ended in complete disaster for the Karathi Navy. Their proud fleet was systematically dismantled as the Devourers adapted to each new weapon and tactic. The final transmission from Admiral Kess was a desperate warning to all galactic forces about the enemy's adaptive capabilities. Back on Earth, General Paul Davis reviewed the battle recordings in a secure bunker beneath the Rocky Mountains. As commander of the planet's military forces, he had been overseeing humanity's response to the galactic crisis. Unlike the other species, Earth had chosen a different approach to the Devourer threat. "Show me the construction reports from the Luna." "Shipyards," Davis ordered his aide. For the past 8 months, humanity had been quietly building a fleet unlike anything seen in galactic space. The ships bore no resemblance to the sleek vessels preferred by other species. They were ugly, functional, and designed for one purpose. Only Captain Steve Turner commanded one of Earth's new stealth reconnaissance vessels as it monitored Devourer movements from the edge of their expanding territory. His ship, Shadowhawk, was built using human technology that the galactic species had dismissed as primitive. It used chemical rockets for propulsion and relied on simple radar absorption materials for stealth. "The enemy has consumed another system," Turner reported during his daily briefing. "They're not just destroying planets, they're harvesting everything: metal, rock, organic matter, even the gases from planetary atmospheres. It all gets fed into their construction bays to build more ships." The intelligence reports painted a disturbing picture. The Devourers weren't just conquering territory, they were converting entire star systems into raw materials for expansion. Each victory made them stronger and more numerous. The mathematical projections suggested that they could consume the entire galaxy within 50 years if left unchecked. Meanwhile, the Galactic Council continued to debate responses that followed established military doctrine. The Zephyrians proposed creating a psychic network to coordinate attacks across multiple species. The remaining Karathi forces wanted to retreat to fortified positions and force the enemy to attack prepared defenses. The Villani still hoped for diplomatic solutions. Ambassador Coleman attended each session and continued to offer Earth's assistance. Each time, the offer was politely declined, with explanations that human technology was too primitive to make a meaningful difference. The galactic species preferred to maintain their traditional approaches to warfare. "Let them learn the hard way," President White told her military advisors during a classified briefing. "Every failed attack teaches us more about enemy capabilities, while revealing nothing about our own preparations." Dr. Frank Miller, head of the Human Defense Initiative, presented his analysis of galactic military thinking to the Global Security Council. "They fight like civilized beings following rules of engagement that assume their opponents will do the same. The Devourers have no concept of honor, fair play, or proportional response. They exist only to consume and grow, hidden factories across. The solar system worked around the clock to produce weapons that other species would consider barbarically simple. While aliens focused on elegant energy weapons and sophisticated targeting systems, humans built missiles that used basic chemical explosives and kinetic weapons that relied on simple physics." The key insight came from studying Earth's own military history. Humanity had spent thousands of years learning how to kill other humans efficiently. They understood concepts like overwhelming firepower, redundant systems, and acceptable casualties that the galactic species found distasteful. As reports of more Devourer victories reached Earth, the human military leadership finalized their preparations. Admiral Lisa Walker oversaw the completion of humanity's secret weapon project in shipyards hidden throughout the outer solar system. The fleet taking shape there would shock the galaxy when it finally revealed itself. "Sir, we're receiving another request from the Council for observer status at their next military planning session," reported Colonel Dan Brown to General Davis. "Tell them we'll continue to observe and learn," Davis replied. "But make sure our ambassador understands that when we finally act, it won't be according to their rules of engagement." The fall began with the outer colonies. Captain Steve Turner watched from his stealth ship as the Devourer fleet systematically consumed the Karathi mining stations in the Vega system. The alien machines worked with terrifying efficiency, stripping planets down to their cores while building new ships from the harvested materials. "Another system gone dark," Turner reported to Earth Command. "The Devourers just finished processing Vega 7. I count 40 new ships added to their fleet from the resources of that one planet." The mathematics were becoming clear to anyone willing to look at the data objectively. Each consumed world made the enemy stronger, while the defending forces grew weaker with every engagement. The Karathi Empire, once the dominant military power in the galaxy, had lost 3/4 of their fleet trying to stop the advance. Admiral Beth Clark commanded Earth's growing battle fleet from a secret base in the Kuiper Belt. Her ships remained hidden while she monitored the desperate communications flowing between the remaining galactic civilizations. The aliens were finally beginning to understand what they faced, but their responses still followed outdated doctrines. The Zephyrians want to create a telepathic barrier around their core worlds, reported Commander Jake Roberts from his position at the communications array. They think they can use their psychic abilities to confuse the machine intelligence controlling the Devourer fleets. Clark studied the tactical reports with growing frustration. Every species continued to approach the crisis from their particular area of expertise. The telepaths wanted to use mental attacks against machines that might not even have minds in any recognizable sense. The remaining warriors planned defensive strategies that assumed their enemies would follow conventional assault patterns. On the Council homeworld of Nexus Prime, panic was beginning to set in among the leadership. Ambassador Coleman attended emergency sessions where desperate proposals grew increasingly wild. Some suggested evacuating entire populations to undiscovered systems beyond the galactic rim. Others wanted to attempt negotiations by offering tribute or resources to satisfy the Devourer's apparent hunger. "We must coordinate our remaining military assets," declared Admiral Vash of the surviving Karathi forces. "A united front using our combined technologies could still stop this threat before it reaches the core systems." Coleman raised her hand to speak, as she had done dozens of times over the past months. "Earth continues to offer our military assistance. Our fleet has been expanding, and we have developed new tactical approaches that might prove effective against adaptive enemies." The response was the same as always: polite dismissal accompanied by explanations about primitive human technology and lack of experience in large-scale void combat. The galactic military leaders preferred to maintain their traditional command structures and established procedures. "Thank you, Ambassador, but this situation requires proven military capabilities," Vash replied with barely concealed condescension. "Human vessels would only complicate our defensive coordination and potentially reveal our positions to the enemy." What the aliens didn't know was that Earth had been tracking their every move for months. Hidden monitoring stations throughout human space intercepted and analyzed every communication, every tactical plan, and every failed engagement. Dr. Frank Miller compiled detailed reports on galactic military thinking for Earth's leadership. "They're making the same mistakes repeatedly," Miller explained to the Global Security Council. "Every species fights according to their established doctrines and cultural preferences. They can't adapt because adaptation would require abandoning the military traditions that define their civilizations." Meanwhile, in the secret shipyards of the outer solar system, humanity prepared for a very different kind of war. The vessels taking shape in those hidden facilities bore no resemblance to the elegant ships preferred by galactic civilizations. They were ugly, functional, and designed around principles that other species found barbaric. Admiral Lisa Walker inspected the first completed squadron of Sledgehammer-class destroyers. Each ship bristled with redundant weapon systems and overlapping defensive measures. The design philosophy rejected efficiency in favor of raw survivability and overwhelming firepower. "How many weapon types does each ship carry?" asked Dr. Amy Foster, the lead weapons designer. 37 different systems per vessel," Walker replied. "Railguns, missile launchers, plasma cannons, kinetic impactors, nuclear mines, and even old-fashioned chemical explosives. The idea is to hit them with so many different attacks that they can't adapt fast enough." The human approach to the Devourer problem was fundamentally different from anything attempted by the galactic species. Instead of trying to outthink or outmaneuver the enemy, humanity planned to overwhelm them with chaotic, unpredictable violence that defied traditional military logic. Colonel Dan Brown trained the first regiments of power-armored Marines for ship-to-ship combat operations. While other species fought from safe distances using precise energy weapons, humans prepared for brutal close-quarters battles aboard enemy vessels. Remember, these aren't civilized opponents following rules of engagement, Brown told his troops. They're machines programmed to consume everything they encounter. The only way to stop them is complete destruction of their ability to function. As the Devourer advance continued, consuming system after system, the galactic civilizations finally began to grasp the true scope of the threat. The Zephyrian homeworld fell despite their psychic defenses. The machines simply ignored mental attacks that had no effect on their artificial intelligence. The Villani Diplomatic Corps made one final attempt at negotiation, sending a peace delegation to meet with the approaching Devourer fleet. The machines consumed the diplomatic vessels along with everything else in their path, converting the ambassadors and their ships into raw materials for construction. All remaining military assets are requested to coordinate final defensive positions. Around the Galactic Core came the desperate transmission from what remained of the Council leadership. Any species with combat capability should report to designated rally points for last-stand operations. Ambassador Coleman received the message while traveling back to Earth aboard her diplomatic vessel. For months, she had watched the galaxy's greatest civilizations make the same fundamental errors repeatedly. They fought like civilized beings against an enemy that recognized no concept of civilization. She composed her response carefully, knowing that it would be the first time humanity had broken their silence since the crisis began. The message would reach every surviving species in the galaxy and change everything they thought they knew about the primitive newcomers from Earth. This is Ambassador Coleman of the Human Commonwealth. Humanity is ready to engage the Devourer threat, all surviving. Military forces should proceed to coordinates that will be transmitted separately. You are about to learn how humans wage war. The coordinates that Ambassador Coleman transmitted led to a region of space that most galactic civilizations had never bothered to explore. Hidden among the asteroid fields and gas clouds of the Sol system's outer reaches, humanity had been building something that would have shocked their alien observers if they had known of its existence. Commander Jake Roberts stood on the bridge of the destroyer Relentless as the first alien vessels began arriving at the rally point. Through the viewport, he could see the survivors of once mighty fleets limping through space with damaged hulls and depleted energy reserves. The proud Karathi warships that had once dominated trade routes now showed the scars of desperate battles. Incoming. Transmission from the Zephyrian vessel Crystal Song, reported the communications officer. They're requesting information about human military capabilities and asking who's in overall command of this operation. Roberts activated the response channel with a slight smile. For months, humanity had been dismissed as primitive newcomers with outdated technology. Now these same species were seeking leadership from the beings they had considered barely capable of spaceflight. Tell them Admiral Tony Garcia commands the Terran Defense Fleet and they'll receive tactical briefings once all surviving forces have arrived, Roberts replied. And make sure they understand that human vessels will take point positions in any engagement. As more alien ships gathered at the rally coordinates, they began to detect the massive fleet that humanity had assembled. Nearly 1,000 vessels emerged from hidden positions throughout the outer system, each one designed according to principles that defied galactic military thinking. The human ships looked nothing like the elegant vessels preferred by other species. They were angular, heavily armored, and covered with what appeared to be crude weapon mountings. To eyes accustomed to the streamlined perfection of advanced alien technology, the human fleet looked like a collection of flying scrapyards. Admiral Tony Garcia commanded the operation from his flagship Defiance, a massive dreadnought that had been built in secret over the past 8 months. The vessel bristled with more weapons than most alien fleets carried in their entire formations. Every surface that could mount a gun carried multiple weapon systems. "Sir, we're receiving protests from several alien commanders," reported Captain Nicole Johnson from her position at the communications station. They want to know why their forces are being positioned behind our battle line instead of being integrated into a coordinated formation. Garcia studied the tactical display showing the positions of all gathered forces. The alien vessels, even damaged as they were, still represented advanced technology and experienced crews. But they also represented military thinking that had already failed repeatedly against the Devourer threat. "Tell them that human forces will engage the enemy first," Garcia replied. "Their job is to observe our tactics and provide support only when specifically requested. We've studied their previous engagements and we're not going to repeat their mistakes." Dr. Amy Foster worked frantically in the weapons development bays, making final preparations for humanity's secret advantage. While other species had focused on creating increasingly sophisticated weapon systems, humans had taken a completely different approach to the problem of adaptive enemies. "Randomization protocols are online for all weapon systems," she reported to the Fleet Command. "Every ship will cycle through completely different attack patterns every few minutes. No weapon will be used in the same configuration twice during the engagement." The human strategy was based on a simple principle that the galactic civilizations had never considered. If the enemy adapted to patterns, then the solution was to eliminate patterns entirely. Every human vessel carried dozens of different weapon types that could be combined in thousands of different ways. Colonel Dan Brown supervised the final preparations of the Marine assault teams. Unlike the other species who fought exclusively, from ship-to-ship distances, humanity prepared for the possibility of boarding enemy vessels and fighting deck by deck through their corridors. "Remember your training," Brown told his power-armored troops. "These machines don't feel pain, don't get tired, and don't surrender. The only way to stop them is complete destruction of their ability to function. Hit them with everything you have and keep hitting them until they stop moving." Meanwhile, the Devourer fleet approached the rally point with inexorable determination. Long-range sensors detected 40 of their massive harvester ships, accompanied by hundreds of smaller hunter-killer vessels. The enemy had grown stronger, with each consumed system adding new ships and capabilities to their already overwhelming force. The surviving alien commanders held increasingly desperate conferences about how to coordinate their remaining assets. Admiral Vash of the Karathi insisted that their graviton weapons could still prove effective if used in sufficient concentrations. The Zephyrian leader Thys wanted to attempt a massive psychic assault against the machine intelligence. "We need to coordinate our attack patterns to maximize the effectiveness of our combined technologies," Vash argued during one of the tactical briefings. "The humans may have numbers, but their primitive weapons won't be effective against enemies that have already adapted to our advanced systems." Captain Steve Turner attended these meetings as Earth's representative and listened to the same arguments that had been failing for months. The aliens still believed that their sophisticated weapons and established tactics would somehow prove superior to the brute force approach that humanity planned to employ. "With respect, Admiral," Turner replied, "your advanced systems have been losing this war from the beginning. The enemy adapts to sophisticated attacks because sophisticated attacks follow predictable patterns. We're not going to give them patterns to adapt to." As the Devourer fleet closed to engagement range, Admiral Garcia made his final preparations. The human vessels moved into attack formation, abandoning all pretense of defensive positioning. Where other species had tried to fight from prepared positions, humanity planned to charge directly into the enemy formation. "All ships, prepare for assault," Garcia broadcast to his fleet. "Remember, we're not trying to outthink these machines or outmaneuver them. We're going to hit them with everything we have and keep hitting them until they're all destroyed. No retreat, no clever tactics, just overwhelming force applied without hesitation." The alien observers watched in horror as the human fleet began accelerating toward the approaching Devourer ships. This wasn't warfare as they understood it. This was something far more primitive and brutal, a return to the kind of combat that civilized species had abandoned centuries ago. The moment of first contact between humanity and the Devourers would be remembered by every surviving species in the galaxy. Admiral Tony Garcia watched from the bridge of the Defiance as his fleet closed to weapons range with the massive enemy formation. Around him, officers prepared weapon systems that the Devourers had never encountered before. "Range to target 200,000 kilometers and closing," reported the tactical officer. "Enemy vessels are maintaining course and speed. No evasive maneuvers detected." The Devourer ships continued their approach with the same methodical precision they had shown in every previous engagement. Their adaptive hulls had learned to resist every weapon system employed by the galactic civilizations. Graviton torpedoes, phase disruptors, plasma cannons, and psychic attacks had all proven useless after initial contact. "All ships, commence firing," Garcia ordered. What happened next defied every principle of civilized warfare. The human fleet opened fire with a barrage that included every conceivable type of weapon imaginable. Nuclear missiles streaked through space alongside kinetic penetrators traveling at significant fractions of light speed. Plasma streams mixed with streams of simple metal projectiles fired from electromagnetic railguns. Captain Nicole Johnson commanded the cruiser Relentless as it unleashed its first salvo against the lead Devourer ship. Her vessel alone carried 17 different weapon systems, each one designed to cause damage through completely different principles. Chemical explosives detonated against alien hulls, while particle beams cut through armor that had adapted to resist energy weapons. The initial impact was devastating. Several smaller Devourer vessels were completely destroyed before their adaptive systems could respond to the chaotic mix of attack types. The larger ships began their characteristic hull modifications, flowing like liquid metal as they tried to counter the incoming weapons. But humanity had anticipated this response. As soon as the enemy hulls began adapting to one weapon type, the human ships switched to completely different attack modes. Ships that had been firing kinetic weapons suddenly launched clouds of fragmentation mines. Vessels using energy weapons switched to chemical warheads or simple kinetic impactors. "Randomization protocol is working," reported Dr. Amy Foster from her position monitoring the weapons systems. "Enemy adaptation is falling behind our weapon rotation cycle. They can't modify their defenses fast enough to counter our changing attack patterns." The battle descended into something that no galactic civilization had seen for centuries. Instead of the elegant dance of advanced weapons and sophisticated tactics, space became filled with explosions, debris, and the raw fury of unrestrained violence. Human ships pressed their attack with suicidal determination, weathering devastating casualties to get within close range. Commander Jake Roberts piloted his destroyer through the chaos as Devourer hunter-killers swarmed around the human formation. His ship had lost main power and half its weapon systems, but he continued the attack using backup systems and emergency batteries. When his missiles were exhausted, he switched to railguns. When the railguns overheated, he used the ship's point. "Defense lasers. Sir, we've lost main propulsion," reported his engineering officer. "Hull breaches on decks 4 through 7. Weapon systems operating at 30% capacity." "Then we use what we have left," Roberts replied grimly. "All remaining power to forward guns. We're going to ram that harvester ship and detonate our reactor core inside their hull." The alien observers watched in stunned silence as human vessel after human vessel pressed attacks that defied all logic of self-preservation. Ships that would have been considered destroyed by galactic standards continued fighting with whatever systems remained functional. Crews that should have evacuated stayed at their posts, using damaged weapons to inflict maximum casualties on the enemy. Admiral Vash of the Karathi fleet broadcast desperately to the human command. "This is madness. You're sacrificing your entire fleet for minimal tactical advantage. Withdraw your forces and let us coordinate a proper assault." Garcia's response was broadcast openly so that every ship in both fleets could hear it. "Admiral, your proper assaults have been failing for months. We're not fighting to preserve our ships or follow military protocol. We're fighting to kill every one of these machines, and we're willing to pay whatever price that requires." Turning point came when Colonel Dan Brown's Marine Assault Team successfully boarded a damaged Devourer harvester ship. Using modified drop pods that could penetrate enemy hulls, his power-armored troops fought their way through corridors filled with repair mechanisms and defensive systems. "The inside of these ships is like a living machine," Brown reported as his team advanced toward what appeared to be a central processing core. "Everything is adaptive, but it takes time for the modifications to take effect. We can damage systems faster than they can repair if we keep moving." The human Marines used weapons that were crude by galactic standards, but effective against enemies that had never encountered them. Explosive charges, chemical incendiaries, and simple kinetic weapons proved devastatingly effective against internal systems that had adapted only to external threats. As news of the successful boarding operation spread through the human fleet, more ships attempted similar assaults. Vessels that were too damaged to continue conventional attacks launched their remaining Marines in desperate boarding attempts. Some succeeded, some failed, but each attempt taught humanity more about enemy vulnerabilities. "Enemy formation is beginning to break apart," reported the tactical officer on the Defiance. "We've confirmed destruction of 15 harvester ships and approximately 60% of their escort vessels. For the first time since the war began, Devourer ships were being destroyed faster than they could adapt to new threats. The chaotic nature of human attacks made it impossible for the enemy to develop effective countermeasures. Every time their hulls adapted to one weapon type, humanity switched to something completely different." Captain Steve Turner watched from his reconnaissance ship as the massive battle reached its climax. Human casualties were staggering, with more than half the fleet showing critical damage, but the Devourer formation was collapsing as their adaptive advantages proved useless against opponents who refused to follow predictable patterns. "This is insane," transmitted the Zephyrian commander Theiss. "They're winning through sheer brutality and willingness to accept casualties that any civilized species would consider unacceptable." The battle continued for 18 hours. Ending only when the last Devourer vessel was completely destroyed. Of the nearly 1,000 human ships that had entered combat, fewer than 200 remained operational. The cost had been terrible. But humanity had achieved something that the galaxy's greatest civilizations had failed to accomplish. The silence that followed the destruction of the last Devourer ship was unlike anything the galaxy had experienced in recorded history. For the first time in over a year, the advancing tide of machine intelligence had been stopped completely. The threat that had consumed dozens of star systems and destroyed the military might have advanced civilizations lay scattered in debris fields throughout the battle zone. Admiral Tony Garcia stood on the bridge of his damaged flagship, surveying the aftermath of humanity's first major engagement in galactic warfare. The cost had been staggering beyond anything that other species would have considered acceptable. More than 800 human vessels had been destroyed or rendered inoperable during the 18-hour battle. "Casualty reports coming in from all surviving ships," reported Captain Nicole Johnson, her voice heavy with exhaustion. "We've lost over 60,000 personnel, another 30,000 wounded. Total fleet operational capacity is down to 18% of pre-battle levels." Garcia nodded grimly as he processed the numbers. In a single engagement, humanity had lost more people than most galactic civilizations had lost in their entire histories of spacefaring warfare. But they had also achieved something that no other species had managed since the crisis began. "Sir, we're receiving communications from the surviving alien fleets," the communications officer reported. "They're requesting permission to approach and assist with rescue operations." For months, those same alien commanders had dismissed human capabilities and refused offers of military assistance. Now they were asking permission to help clean up after a battle that had saved what remained of galactic civilization. "Grant them approach clearance," Garcia replied. "But make it clear that human vessels maintain operational command of this system until further notice." Captain Ryan Clark piloted his heavily damaged destroyer through the debris field, searching for survivors from ships that had been completely destroyed during the assault. His vessel had lost main power early in the battle, but had continued fighting using backup systems and sheer determination. "We're picking up life signs from an escape pod," reported his sensor operator. "Looks like survivors from the cruiser, Defiant." As rescue operations continued throughout the system, the magnitude of what humanity had accomplished began to sink in among the alien observers. Admiral Vash of the Karathi approached the human command ship in a vessel that showed extensive battle damage from previous engagements with the Devourers. "Admiral Garcia, I must formally apologize for my previous statements regarding human military capabilities," Vash transmitted. "Your forces have achieved what we considered impossible. How did you develop tactics that could counter their adaptive defenses?" Garcia's response was broadcast openly to all vessels in the system. "We studied your previous engagements and learned from your failures. You fought like civilized beings following established military doctrine. We fought like we were trying to exterminate a plague that threatened everything we cared about." Dr. Sandra Taylor, now serving as Earth's chief diplomatic advisor, arrived at the battle site aboard a hospital ship to begin coordinating with the survivors of galactic civilization. Her first priority was establishing communications with the scattered remnants of the various species that had managed to escape devourer attacks. "The reports are coming in from across the galaxy," she announced during an emergency briefing with human military leadership. "The devourer threat appears to have been completely eliminated. All their major fleets were apparently coordinated from central command nodes that we destroyed during the engagement." The implications were staggering. Humanity's willingness to accept massive casualties in a single decisive battle had accomplished what months of sophisticated military campaigns had failed to achieve. The machine intelligence that had seemed unstoppable had been vulnerable to one simple tactic that no other species had been willing to employ. "Why didn't you share these tactics with us earlier?" asked Thys of the Zephyrians during one of the post-battle conferences. "Countless lives could have been saved if we had understood how to fight these enemies effectively." Ambassador Lisa Coleman, who had spent months watching galactic civilizations make the same mistakes repeatedly, provided the answer that many found difficult to accept. "We offered our assistance dozens of times and were told that human technology was too primitive to be useful. You preferred to fight according to your established military traditions rather than consider alternatives." The truth was uncomfortable for the surviving alien leadership to acknowledge. Their adherence to civilized warfare had made them predictable enough for the Devourers to counter effectively. Humanity's willingness to abandon all pretense of military sophistication had proven to be exactly what the situation required. Colonel Dan Brown compiled reports from the Marine teams that had successfully boarded enemy vessels during the battle. Their discoveries provided crucial intelligence about how the machine intelligence had operated and why it had been so difficult to defeat using conventional tactics. The Devourers were designed to analyze and counter specific threat types, Brown explained to the assembled military leaders. They could adapt to any consistent attack pattern within minutes, but they couldn't handle random, chaotic assaults that constantly changed without following any logical progression. As the weeks passed and cleanup operations continued, the true scope of the galactic crisis became clear. The great civilizations that had once dominated space were reduced to scattered refugees with minimal military capabilities. Entire species had been nearly driven to extinction by the machine plague. President Karen White reviewed the strategic situation from her command center deep beneath the Rocky Mountains. Earth had emerged as the dominant military power in the galaxy, but with that power came enormous responsibilities that humanity had never expected to shoulder. The other species are looking to us for leadership in rebuilding galactic civilization, she told her advisors. They've lost most of their infrastructure, their governments, and their military forces. We're the only ones left with the capability to maintain order and security. The irony was not lost on anyone involved in the decision-making process. The species that had been dismissed as primitive newcomers were now being asked to guide the recovery of civilizations that were thousands of years older than humanity. Admiral Garcia addressed this reality during his final report to Earth Command. For 2 years, we offered assistance and were told we weren't advanced enough to matter. We stayed silent and prepared while they fought with honor and sophistication. The galaxy paid a terrible price for that silence. In the end, humanity had learned the most important lesson of all. Sometimes being underestimated provided the greatest advantage possible. The galaxy would remember both the cost of dismissing Earth's capabilities and the price of humanity's delayed intervention. Everyone would wonder how many lives could have been saved if pride and prejudice had not kept humanity silent until it was almost too late.